Ever get that feeling, you know, that feeling where it's like, are we really living through something new, or is this like a broken record of history? Kind of eerie, right? Well, get ready for a heavy dose of that today because we're going back in time, like way back. We're diving deep into this very week. But get this exactly 100 years ago.
Using, of course, the always intriguing, always a gold mine, the R100yearsago subreddit.
You got it. And let me tell you, October 1924, what a wild ride. We're talking everything from like the glitz and glam of Hollywood's early days to those oh so real, oh no moments they just don't show in the movies. And, well, let's just say we even get a little peek into something that still kind of sends shivers down my spine.
It's like a good reminder, right? Like we might have this romanticized picture of the past, but 1924, it was a time of, well, huge leaps forward for sure, but also some harsh realities.
No sugarcoating here. Okay, so try to imagine it. 1924. The roaring 20s are in full swing. You got flapper dresses, jazz music, the whole shebang. The world's trying to, forget about World War I, heal a little. And Hollywood, well, Hollywood's becoming, Hollywood.
A real melting pot of change, you could say. I mean, culturally, technologically, you name it. It was a time when the old ways were being challenged, sometimes thrown right out the window.
And sometimes, well, sometimes those changes, they had a real, real dark side. There's this one story that really got to me, just stayed with me. I'm talking about silent film star Kate Lester.
Yeah, October 12th, 1924. Lester was, well, she was killed. It was a gas explosion in her Hollywood dressing room.
Tragic. And talk about a wake-up call. Even the most glamorous places, danger was lurking. You just got to wonder about things like safety regulations back then, or the lack thereof.
You're right, it was a different world back then. And Lester's death, it really shook the film industry to its core. I mean, here they were embracing gaslighting as the symbol of progress of modern living. And then, bam, this horrible accident exposes the deadly risks. It ultimately led to demands, louder and louder calls for, well, stricter safety measures in the years that followed.
It's kind of amazing, right, how something so awful could spark real change. But, 1924 wasn't all doom and gloom. Not at all. In fact, the very next day, October 13th, a real game changer, a comedic masterpiece, had its big premiere. We're talking Buster Keaton's The Navigator.
Keaton, oh, he was something else. That deadpan expression, those stunts. He was already making a name for himself, but the Navigator, that's the one that cemented his place as well. A legend of silent film comedy.
And you know what really blows me away? Keaton himself. He thought this was his best film, his best work. And think about it, a century later, people are still cracking up at his stuff. His physical comedy, his way of finding humor in the most unexpected places. It's timeless.
Absolutely. The Navigator, it's all visual gags, ingenious stunts, pure creativity. And that's what's so cool about it. It speaks to everyone. You don't need subtitles. Keaton's talent, his humor, it just transcends language.
It's kind of wild how these stories, these lives, they all intertwine,
Yeah.
like happening at the same time. In 1924, while Keaton was busy changing the face of comedy, something else pretty amazing was going down. Talk about pushing the limits of what's possible, right?
Oh, absolutely. On that very same day, October 12th, the German Zeppelin, the LZ-126, it set off on a transatlantic flight.
It's easy to forget, I think, in our world of jumbo jets and whatnot, just how revolutionary Zeppelins were back then. They really were something else.
We were massive, these huge airships floating on hydrogen, powered by, well, pretty powerful engines for the time. They captured the imagination, luxury, speed, the promise of shrinking the world, bringing continents closer together. It was a whole thing.
Speaking of shrinking distances, though, the LZ-126, it ran into a bit of a hiccup on that trip from Germany to the Azores. On the 13th, actually.
A bit of engine trouble, you could say, definitely added some drama to the journey. And a reminder, I think, that with any new technology, especially back then, there were risks, real risks.
Can you imagine being a passenger on that flight? Talk about a nail biter.
Mm.
But even with the unexpected detours, you got to hand it to them, the sheer guts it took.
No doubt. The LZ-126, it might have hit a few bumps, literally, but it embodied that spirit of, well, pushing boundaries, exploring the unknown. That's what that era was all about, really. Progress, even if it meant a few unknowns along the way.
Okay, get this same day, October 12th, 1924, something happens that, well, looking back, it's downright chilling. A photo is taken. It's a young Adolf Hitler with some other prisoners at Landsberg Fortress. Just a photo, right? But wow.
Gives you chills, doesn't it? That image, so ordinary on the surface, it takes on this whole other meaning knowing what we know now. Makes you think about how history unfolds, right? All these threads, some big, some seemingly small, happening at the same time, weaving together in ways we could never predict.
It's tempting to oversimplify the past, black and white, good guys, bad guys.
Yeah.
But it's moments like these that remind us how much more complex it really was. And speaking of complex, there's another event from October 12th that I just found fascinating. Harry Houdini, the escape artist. The legend he was giving a lecture on spiritualism at the Texas State Fair, of all places.
Houdini is so interesting, don't you think? I mean, his whole thing was debunking the supernatural, exposing those phony mediums and their tricks, logic, reason. That was Houdini.
Right, the ultimate skeptic.
Exactly. But here's the thing. He was also deeply curious about life after death. So he'd give these lectures on spiritualism, be critical, but people flocked to hear him. It speaks to that human need, I think, that desire to make sense of the big mysteries, even when science is making all these leaps and bounds.
I don't know about you, but seeing Houdini at a Texas State Fair, that would have been something else. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, really. Remember that our 100 years ago subreddit I mentioned?
Oh, yeah, you said it was a gold mine, full of little-known historical gems.
And I wasn't kidding. Get this. October 11th, same week, the Boston Bruins and the Montreal Maroons, they're granted NHL franchise.
Wow, no, that's a piece of hockey history I did not see coming. 2 of the original 6, right there at the beginning. Pretty cool.
Can you imagine snagging an NHL franchise for a cool $15,000? Those were the days.
Yeah, $15,000 for an NHL team. Wild, right? It makes you realize how much the whole sports world has changed just in 100 years.
No kidding. And speaking of change, on a bit of a more serious note, get this, that same week, a theater reopens in Tokyo.
Right, right. It's a reminder, isn't it, of that terrible earthquake, the Great Kanto Earthquake, just devastated Tokyo a year earlier, 1923.
And here they are, rebuilding. It makes you think about resilience, the human spirit and all that.
Totally. Reopening that theater, it was symbolic, right? Like, okay,
Right.
things are tough, but we're coming back, life goes on. A real testament to, well, to just how strong people can be.
And then there's this little historical nugget I stumbled on. October 12th, again, the Moldavian Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic, the AMAJ SSR, it's formed. I'll be honest, I had to look that one up.
I don't blame you. Sounds like something straight out of a textbook, that's for sure. But it's a good reminder, that while all this other stuff is happening in Hollywood, Zeppelin's the world is a complicated place. Geopolitics, power struggles, it's always there.
Right. It's easy to forget how much the world map was changing back then. Borders redrawn, new countries popping up.
Exactly. And the AMA SSR stuck between Ukraine and Romania, that's the Soviet Union flexing its muscles,
I know.
trying to solidify its grip on all that territory.
Just goes to show something that seems like a footnote to us today.
Yeah.
Back then, it was huge for the people living through it.
100%. And that's what I love about these little trips back in time, these deep dives. You find these forgotten stories, these details that might seem small, but they add up. They give you a much richer, more honest picture of the past.
It's like we're putting together a puzzle, right?
Right.
One piece at a time. In 1924, well, it's a heck of a puzzle. Hollywood glamour, daring flights, but also political turmoil, natural disasters. And through it all, you see this incredible resilience.
That's the thing about history, isn't it? It's full of these contradictions, these moments of tragedy and triumph all happening at once, and somehow it all weaves together to get us to where we are today.
It's amazing to think it was 100 years ago, all of this. The world was a very different place back then. But in a lot of ways, it's not that different at all. We're still grappling with the same big questions, still trying to make sense of it all.
It's a good reminder that the past, it's not really past, is it? It's still with us, shaping our world in ways we might not even realize. But maybe if we try to understand it a little better, learn from those who came before us, we can, navigate our own time with a little more wisdom, a little more grace.
So yeah, as you go about your day, take a second, think about those folks back in 1924. Their stories, their struggles, their joys. It's all part of this incredible journey we're all on, this thing we call history. And hey, if you ever find yourself with a spare moment, curious about a certain date, a certain event, dive in, do your own research. You never know what you might find.